Week 2 of the 2021 NFL season is behind us, and at this point, we kind of have a little bit of an idea of the teams that we thought we were going to be contending, teams that we thought we were going to be terrible, and teams at this point who we think are going to be the main playoff players when the season comes to an end. However, before we get into what the end of the season looks like, let's go ahead and take a look at what Week 2 looked like for the entire league. The NFC West looks like it is as strong as ever, with 3 of the 7 remaining undefeated teams laying in the NFC West. And the only team that isn't undefeated in that division right now is the Seattle Seahawks, who are no pushovers themselves. Let's go ahead and talk about some teams who won in their Week 2 matchup. We have the Washington football team, who took down the New York Giants in kind of a big shootout between those two teams. The Chicago Bears got a good win against the Cincinnati Bengals when Andy Dalton went down and had to rely on Justin Fields for the second half. The Raiders, a 2-week stretch, beating the Ravens and the Steelers back-to-back weeks. That's just an incredible start to the season. Derek Carr is firmly in the MVP race with those Las Vegas Raiders. The Buffalo Bills had a huge win. 35-0. Anytime you beat a team by 35 points and allow a shutout on the defensive side of the ball, that is just incredible. The Arizona Cardinals look great against the Minnesota Vikings. And the Tennessee Titans win another shootout between two good teams in Seattle. I think I saw that Seattle had not lost their home opener in something like 12, 13 years. This is the first time in 12 or 13 years that they lost their home opener. And for the Tennessee Titans, that's just a really good game. Now let's go ahead and talk about some teams who had a really bad loss over this last week. Like I said, the Buffalo Bills, anytime you beat someone 35-0, it looks really good. For the Miami Dolphins, anytime you lose 35-0, it looks really bad. They ended up losing to Tagovailoa during the first quarter. It looks like he's going to be down for a few weeks. That kind of just throws a whole new wrench into this Deshaun Watson rumor, whether or not they're going to end up trading for him or not. We're gonna, I guess, see what Jacoby Brissett can do with a full playbook at hand and with a full week of game plan ahead with him as the quarterback. The Seattle Seahawks, like I said, it was the first time they've lost at home in their home opener in 12 or 13 seasons, and it was just a bad loss in terms of if they ended up winning that game, that does a lot for their confidence, but losing that game, I think, does a lot worse for their confidence going forward. And the LA Chargers. The LA Chargers end up losing 20-17 to a Dallas Cowboys team who does not have a good defense, and they only scored 17 points. Justin Herbert didn't look good. The offense in general just didn't look great, and it just was not a good loss for that team. Let's go ahead and talk about some performances in terms of good performances of last week. I'm going to split this between quarterbacks and skill position players. And defending players as well. So at first, I'm going to talk about the quarterbacks. Taylor Heinicke, 34 for 46, 2 touchdowns, and the win against the Giants. Sam Darnold looked great. Derek Carr again looked great. Teddy Bridgewater and Kyler Murray both had incredible games. But the quarterback who had the best week last week obviously was Tom Brady. 24 for 36, 276 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. They look even better than they did last year at the beginning of this season. And it probably is going to look even better once the end of the season comes around and they are again fighting for that Super Bowl contention. Now let's go ahead and talk about the best performances from the skill position players and defensive players. Let's go ahead and start with the defensive players. Mike Edwards and Tyrann Mathieu, both with a pick six. Mike Edwards with 2 pick sixes. Tyrann Mathieu with a pick six on the first drive of his defensive season. They both played well. Tyrann Mathieu, as always, plays an incredible game in that secondary. Mike Edwards with those 2 pick sixes and filling in at that safety position. They just both played well. Max Crosby as well. He did not have a sack, but he did have 5 QB hits in that game against Ben Roethlisberger and the I almost said the Las Vegas Steelers. That would be a dope team name though. In that game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, he did have 5 QB hits on Big Ben, so that was just great in terms of just affecting the quarterback and getting him off his spots. Bobby Wagner, I think he had something like 19 tackles or something like that in that overtime game against the Titans. So, that's just a great game from him as well. Now let's get to the offense. Cooper Kupp and Tyler Lockett just both completely destroyed the defenses that they were playing last week. Cooper Kupp against the Indianapolis Colts in that win, and Tyler Lockett against the Tennessee Titans in their loss. Derrick Henry and Aaron Jones, two incredible performances. Derrick Henry with 3 touchdowns in the second half. Aaron Jones with 4 touchdowns in the Monday night game against the Detroit Lions last night. Just 2 incredible games from 2 incredible guys who we kind of expect incredible performances from every single game. And especially for Derrick Henry coming off a game previous week where he had, I believe, less than 60 yards rushing. It was a good bounce back game for him against a decent Seattle defense. And just like I said, he played incredible. Next, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the coaches of the week for last week. You got Matt Rule over in Carolina, having those Carolina Panthers ready to play a decimated New Orleans Saints team, not taking them lightly and not giving up any play that's an incredible coaching job out of Matt Rule. Mike Vrabel, a big win for the Tennessee Titans. I'm going to keep on saying this. The first at-home loss in the home opener for the Seattle Seahawks in like 12, 13 years. That's just an incredible job out of Mike Vrabel. And John Harbaugh, the first time that he has beaten the Kansas City Chiefs since Lamar Jackson became the starting quarterback. I believe he was 0-4 between the regular season and playoffs against the Kansas City Chiefs. They didn't do it really on the defensive side of the ball other than Ofeda Owe. I believe that's the way you say his name. He was their rookie pass rusher that they drafted, number 99. He made one big play defensively, and that ended up shifting the game for the Baltimore Ravens. You know, they got down early after Lamar Jackson threw a pick 6. He threw another interception later on in the game. But once they kind of settled in and relied on Lamar Jackson to do well what he does well, they ended up taking off and beating that Kansas City Chiefs team. I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact that John Harbaugh put some trust in Lamar Jackson on that 4th down late in the game to go get that first down. And once he did it, he looked like a genius. So John Harbaugh, coach of the week for me. Now, after I've talked about everything that went well for teams last week, I did talk about worst losses of the week already, but let's go ahead and get into some individual performances that were not very great. Let's start with the coaches. Brian Flores, again, you lose 35-0. I understand that Tua Tagovailoa goes down early in the game, but you know, they were losing pretty handedly before he went down. I believe it was 14-0 when he did injure those ribs. So Brian Flores, rough week for him. Mike Zimmer as well. I think if they end up going to Seattle or playing Seattle this week and they get handled like I think the Seahawks are going to handle the Vikings, we could see Mike Zimmer get fired this year. It could be after the week 3 if it's a bad loss. It could be sooner or earlier. It could be later than that, but you know, this could be the end of the Mike Zimmer era coming soon. And Frank Reich, this is a 2-week losing streak for the Indianapolis Colts. This was supposed to be the perfect system for Carson Wentz. This is supposed to be the year where Frank Reich gets back with Carson Wentz and they take off and get to the playoffs. But so far, they're 0-2. Their point differential is -15. Carson Wentz does not look really good. So the Colts and Frank Reich are the bad coaching performances of the week. Now let's talk about individual performances. This is kind of just going to be on the offensive side of the ball. And again, I don't think I've said this, but I'm not trying to make it seem like I think these are bad players. I just think they had a rough week. Players have rough weeks from time to time. Saquon Barkley, after he had a 41-yard run in that game against the Washington football team, I think he had less than 20 yards on the rest of his 12 carries. So rough week for Saquon. He's behind a rough offensive line. So, you know, just rough week for Saquon. Tyreek Hill had the 5th least receiving yards in his entire career. And when you look at the games, you know, a lot of the games that were less than that were games where he was in his first or second year catching 1 to 2 passes a game. So a rough week for Tyreek Hill. I know everyone has seen that Anthony Averett play where he kind of just locked him up and defended the pass really well. I don't know if that was happening the entire game against the Ravens, but he definitely got locked up on that one play. We really don't see that from Tyreek Hill a lot. Chris Carson didn't have a good week against the Tennessee Titans. Jamal Williams, this is going to be his first game against the Green Bay Packers after they let him go and he signed with the Detroit Lions. Not a good week out of him, especially when you consider the fact that Aaron Jones, his best friend from the running back room last year, goes for 4 touchdowns. Devonta Smith did not have a good week for the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles just didn't have a good week in general, putting up only 11 points against the San Francisco 49ers, and Jalen Hurts didn't look great as well, which I'll talk about in a minute. The two of them just didn't look great. Corey Davis, 8 yards. This is the Corey Davis that we kind of have come to expect. He had a good week in his first week with Zach Wilson against the Carolina Panthers, but he had 8 yards this week. Like I said, it's kind of one of those things that where you expect Corey Davis to be inconsistent, and he proved it this week. Now let's get into the quarterbacks who had a rough week. I already kind of said his name earlier, but Jalen Hurts, he just didn't have a good week. This is kind of one of those weeks where you look at Jalen Hurts and wonder if he's actually the guy in Philadelphia, which I'll probably be making a video about soon as to whether or not they need to really look at a trade for Deshaun Watson. They have their 3 first-round draft picks. They've got a lot to do in terms of being able to trade for Deshaun Watson. So this is one of those weeks where Jalen Hurts is looked at as whether or not he's the guy. Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence, 2 rookie quarterbacks who really struggled. Zach Wilson threw 4 interceptions. I believe Trevor Lawrence threw 2 or 3 as well. They just didn't look good, and they have their rookie wall that they need to get through. We'll see if they're able to get through it these next couple of weeks. Jameis Winston putting up 7 points against the Carolina Panthers defense that is young and inexperienced. It just was a bad week out of New Orleans in general. And Justin Herbert, I talked about him earlier. He just didn't look good. This was a guy who I thought was going to be firmly in the MVP race by this point in the season. And right now, he just kind of is an average quarterback. So, coming from a Rookie of the Year quarterback, a guy who was in probably my top 10 of quarterbacks coming into this season, he's definitely played below to slightly below average. So, rough week out of Herbert. I'm sure he'll bounce back, though, and end up making me eat my words by the end of the season. And with that, really the only teams that I don't think I talked about were the Cleveland Browns beating the Houston Texans 31-21. That wasn't really that important of a game for anybody. The New England Patriots really made a fool out of Zach Wilson last week. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers got it done against the Falcons. But other than that, I think I kind of covered every team over this past week. The Denver Broncos also beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. Teddy Bridgewater had an incredible game, like I said earlier. With all that being said, that's going to be the video for me. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you leave a like. If you didn't, make sure you leave a dislike. I'm going to try to do these after every single week. Maybe put them out either Tuesdays or Wednesdays before I do a week, the next week's predictions. So if you like these, make sure you hit the like button and tell me that you like it, because I appreciate that. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.